Safety not guaranteed. No, I'm not talking about the Colin Trevorrow sci-fi comedy starring Mark Duplass and Aubrey Plaza. This is neither the time or the place to discuss that film. Safety Not Guaranteed is also the takeaway from a film that, pardon the cliche, changed everything. It showed us that you don't have to run into outcasts in the middle of nowhere or be possessed by the devil in order to be a victim of evil. It's everywhere. In the safest neighborhoods, on the quietest streets, evil lurks, evil breeds, evil comes home tonight. This is Halloween.
Hi.
I wonder how much of that empty space we'd cut out for the audio, or if we just leave
No. Let them handle the silence for just 2 seconds.
Sit in it for a while. And I think the reason is, if you're watching us on video, we dressed up.
Yeah.
Spooky season is upon us, and I think each episode we want to do a cheap version of dressing up.
As per Nice to tradition, you're bringing back the Guy Fieri costume, I see.
Yeah, which I've worn for 2 separate Halloween reaction videos on our channel.
This is your 3rd year having the outfit, I think.
I keep all of our costumes in our closet just in case we need them. You bought a new one today.
Yeah, I got a little excited and saw it at Target and was like, well, I didn't even know what you were going to wear. It just happened to be harmonious this morning that you're wearing Guy Fieri and I'm wearing a cheeseburger.
Yeah, I called you this morning and I was like, yeah, man, so I think I'm going to do the Guy Fieri costume again. And you're like, that's so funny because I didn't tell you this, but 2 days ago, I bought a cheeseburger costume from Target. So I was like, that can't have worked out more perfectly.
Yeah. So here we are.
Is this your first time wearing a costume that, I don't mean to be rude, but is basic like that, where it's just like, how some people will be like, I'm going to be a hot dog or I'm going to be a ketchup bottle or whatever. Is this your first time wearing a costume that's that basic?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I've gotten like really easy, low maintenance costumes before.
That's different. That's different.
But in terms of just something that you just pull off the store rack, yeah, 100%.
Something I've always wanted to do for Halloween is do the white sheet ghost costume.
Oh, okay. You'd be like a classic, like little kid in the 50s costume.
Right, but I feel like it would just be uncomfortable the whole night to just have that.
Barely be able to see, too.
Yeah.
It's not very practical. And for like a grown man to be wearing it, it's very different,
I think a lot about E.T. in that costume as well.
Yeah, it's like cute when a kid does it.
Remember the scene in E.T., the Halloween sequence, where like E.T.'s in the ghost sheet?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And then he sees the older brother has a costume with the knife impaled in his head. Mm-hmm. And he's like, ouch. He's like, no, get out. And then when he sees a kid in a Yoda costume, E.T.'s like, home.
Yeah, and you can slightly hear like a little like echo of the Yoda theme too.
It's so beautiful. There's that story of like, apparently Steven Spielberg was showing George Lucas E.T. in a screening with other people in there. And George Lucas just like nudged Spielberg during that scene. It was kind of like clearly like he did it for his friend.
Yeah. He's like, hey, you like that?
Now if they did something like that, I'd be like, okay, come on.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're talking about Halloween today.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce the podcast as per tradition?
I'd love to. Welcome to Movies That Changed Us. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to explore how Halloween changed us. And if you're watching this, sorry. If you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast, know that you can also watch our podcast at Movies That Changed Us.
We have a Patreon if anyone want to check it out. We just changed the name to it. It is patreon.com/movies that changed us now. So it's now just the name of the show. We do early access, ad-free videos and podcasts. And we also do weekly commentary tracks where we watch movies and you can listen along and watch them with us.
Okay, so, and also I'll just mention really quickly, the commentary series we're doing this month for spooky season on our Patreon is horror comedies. That's what our patrons voted for.
Yeah.
So like that includes Scary Movie, Evil Dead 2, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, etc.
Yeah. So
it's going to be a fun and jolly and spooky time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Halloween, huge movie.
Yeah.
Huge movie.
So I can't remember. Was your first time? Because I know we did a reaction to it a while ago.
But it was a rewatch reaction.
It was a rewatch, yeah. But was it for both of us a rewatch? Or was it just me rewatching it and it was your first time? I don't remember, honestly.
Well, I think from what I remember, the reaction, I had made it clear that like I hadn't really seen this movie that often as you have. I'd probably seen it like once or twice before.
Like in high school or like as a kid or
college, high school. I can't really remember now, but like I had seen it before. But it wasn't a huge movie for me.
Gotcha.
Primarily because horror wasn't a thing that I got into until probably 3 years ago. 4 years ago. Yeah, that's right. Probably mostly during like lockdown era and everything is when I and it was mostly just because I was a scaredy cat. It was as simple as that. I was just too scared.
Yeah.
And And during lockdown is when I started really fully diving into watching all different types of movies. I watched more foreign movies than I ever had. There was nothing to do, so I was like, okay, let's really broaden my horizons. And I realized horror was like the main thing I always held out on.
Can you fire off a couple other horror movies you got to check out during lockdown?
Yes.
I know Train to Busan was one of them, which is both horror and it's foreign too.
Blair Witch I had watched for the first time during lockdown.
Oh yeah, I got to show you Blair Witch.
That was a big one. We should do that on the podcast sometime.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So yeah, in general, that was a big thing. And then John Carpenter in general, we talked a little bit about the thing. I feel like he's been a big thing for us since we started doing movie reactions on the main channel. And so now going back to Halloween now, right? After having seen way more John Carpenter movies than I had when we started Nice Street Movie Night, it's like, it's so crazy that watching Halloween, which is one of his like first movies that kind of jump-started everything for him, it
jump-started a genre.
It jump-started a genre, is so totemic in that way. It still feels like, oh yeah, he basically made this movie over and over again in different genres.
Sure, yeah.
Like this kind of like minimalist style, that kind of music, that kind of just in general vibe.
Yeah, that kind of dread and bleakness. By the way, what word did you say earlier before? I've
Totemic, you liked it?
Where the fuck did that come
I heard
from?
it on a podcast somewhere.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
really proud.
Once in a while you chuck in a word. I just didn't want to let that totally go.
I wonder if he'll catch it. I actually said it for you. I was like, okay, if he catches it, he'll call me out on
I was
it.
curious because sometimes you'll sneak in a new word and then hope I don't catch it. But this time you wanted me to catch it.
Yeah, I'm rambling on and on about this, but John Carpenter became a favorite filmmaker of mine, and Halloween is now one of my favorite movies, and I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, so the very first movie specifically, I didn't really sit down and watch till like high school, college territory, but Halloween as a franchise has been I remember, it holds a special place in my heart. It's very fond to me. The first one I saw was Halloween 4.
That's the first Halloween movie you watched.
Yeah, it was on cable. It was airing on TV.
So I'm like kind of blind to the franchise, aside from the David Gordon Green ones.
Yeah.
Who's in the fourth one? What's that?
So Halloween is one of the messiest franchises in horror when it comes to like continuity, because it retcons itself like 2 times and it has a remake. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot going on.
And then the David Gordon Green one is like, none of those sequels existed.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean by retcons itself. You know what I mean? It just kind of undoes all of them. So Halloween 4, though, is called The Return of Michael Myers, and it takes place like 10 years, I think, after Halloween 2. Because Halloween 2 ends with like a fiery explosion where Michael Myers supposedly dies, but really it put him in a coma, and then he wakes up, essentially. But so 4, though, is about Laurie Strode's niece. And so you know the general expanded lore that Michael is like Laurie's brother, and that they do in the franchise.
Oh, right. I have heard of that. Yes.
Yeah. So I won't bore you with all of it, but mostly it's about a little girl, though, that's supposed to be Laurie Strode's niece. Laurie's passed away at this point. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, my first exposure to Michael Myers was a scene when this character, her name's Jamie Lloyd. She's a popular character in the Halloween fandom.
Yeah.
She has a nightmare where she gets up and then a random hand reaches out and grabs her ankle from under her bed, and she gets out and screams, and then she runs and tries to open the door, but it's locked, and emerging from under the bed is Michael Myers, and it's like dark, and he leans up and lightning strikes to like light him so you can see him, and he starts walking towards her with a knife. Scared the shit out of me as a kid. Absolutely. I was like 10 or something.
Sounds horrifying.
And so, but I watched it. I kept watching it. And I think it was my first introduction to like the general slasher genre, like all the tropes that we know of, like the slow stalking serial killer that you can't really defeat, that is seemingly impossible. You can run as far as you want, and Michael Myers somehow finds a way to catch up with you and beat you.
But you had joined the franchise when it was already, it had its like ups and downs, and it was already it was like kind of a machine at this point.
100%. I mean, it was mostly done at that point too. I think Halloween H2O was already out and everything.
Yeah, that's the one with Josh Hartnett, right?
Yeah, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's in it for a little bit too.
JGL.
Yeah, our boy JGL.
Yeah.
He gets killed with an ice skate shoe.
Oh.
Like you don't see his death, but like this lady opens the door and sees him like on a chair, and it's like already in his face.
Castaway style. I mean,
exactly.
Tom Hanks just like took out his tooth with an ice.
Yeah, but similar in a similar vein, I guess. But Yeah, so basically to summarize it though, yeah. So like I think I didn't really grow up watching the Friday the 13th movies a lot on TV like a lot of people did. Mostly for me it was Halloween.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the thing with Friday the 13th, like I basically saw that franchise in bits and pieces when I was at hotels.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because it would just be on TV all the time, like you said. And because I wasn't a big horror nut, I wouldn't seek them out. But if there was nothing on TV, I'll be like, all right, I guess we're watching this. Especially if I was with friends and they would just be like, oh, this is the one where he's here and whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I said, I watched Halloween, but I couldn't even appreciate it. I was like, oh, watching it through my fingers in a way, just because I got...
It stressed you out, yeah.
And now I am someone that is very much into horror. I've like took such a 180 on horror now, where I actually like seek things out. I'm a Shudder guy.
I'm a Shudder guy, dude.
You know,
shout out Shudder.
It's
want us to promote?
Literally sponsor us.
We'll happily sponsor Shudder.
I mean, yeah, but. So now watching Halloween, obviously I can appreciate everything that it's done, but it is insane. Something that I never took into account was how it just changed the genre.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it started that classic final girl trope and the mass killer and all that. I mean, you know, obviously like Texas Chainsaw Massacre came before it, but that movie's just very visceral and has a different energy to it. I think Halloween started kind of like a popcorny way of watching slasher movies. If that makes any sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Halloween in general, you know, since we're starting this season with this movie, I just want to start here. What does Halloween in general mean to you?
Oh, I mean, I don't really prescribe like deep meaning to Halloween necessarily.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking like, is like a lot of adults our age are like full on into spooky season. Like September's ending, they're making plans. Each weekend is like, this is a hayride. We got to do this mansion. We got to do
Halloween horror nights.
Horror nights.
Yeah.
Like, I've known you for a while. You're like, you like it. You do the Halloween night. You'll dress up with your girlfriend. You guys will go out. But like, even when you were younger, before I met you, were you someone that's just like, fuck yeah, October's here. Let's do this. This is the whole month now.
I want to be one of those people, I think, because I do respect it and I like the idea and I like kind of seeing, I'm one of those people. I also like walking through the decor on Halloween season. I don't just get dragged by my girlfriend to it. I do like to go look at it too.
Yeah.
But I often forget to like really be deliberate and like buy stuff and like decorate I don't do any of that, but I do really like to plan ahead and dress up and do fun stuff on the actual day.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. It's just out of laziness, really. Like that I don't.
Yeah, you're not a big like dress upper,
I dress up the like night of Halloween and I go out. I've gone out with you a few times and I try to do something each year, but it's not like the top of my priority list. I think what I'm trying to get to is that I feel like there's a certain thing that happens with people in like our age. 28, 29, so like late 20s, early 30s, where it becomes kind of like a Disney adult thing, where it's just like this age range somehow I feel like is more psyched about spooky season than like kids.
Yeah, there's truth in that.
They're just so pumped for it. They're just like, this is the whole month now.
Oh yeah,
and I feel like even, and I don't know this for sure, but I feel like even kids aren't as hyped about Halloween as like adults in our age range are.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to me.
I've dressed up for Halloween at work because I've had jobs where I had to work on Halloween. And
same. I've
had 2 jobs where they let me dress up, and you know this story, and maybe we can pop up the picture.
This is the best story. Yeah.
But I wore a full body morph suit of Spider-Man to work.
You were working at an ice cream shop.
Yeah, and I wore my hat and apron over it.
So you serve people ice cream
dressed up as Spider-Man, yeah, including little kids. Are freaked out over it. It was
I know
pretty cool.
That's the part that makes me so jealous that you dressed up as Spider-Man and there were kids that were super psyched to see that.
And they would be super nervous, like they wouldn't be psyched to me, but as they left, I can hear, "Mom, that was Spider-Man!" Like they freak out. It's so adorable.
That's amazing. Fucking Spider-Man.
I know Spider-Man just always has.
He's cool. He's great. I love him. He's my best friend.
But and then another year I wore a Super Mario costume to work as well.
That's so dope.
Yeah,
and I'm not gonna reveal it if you don't want to, but you and your girlfriend have had great like couple costumes.
Yeah, we've done some cool ones. So I do like to go hard on the actual day, but I'm not one for like
I've third
the full month.
I've third wheeled you while you're like you and your girlfriend have dressed up and I dressed up as something different, but you two have a couple costume, and I've third wheeled that situation a few times now. And it is a great joy is just seeing everyone react to you two. So yeah, I mean, it is, I think it's relevant to bring this up because it's kind of just funny that this movie just became, it just calls itself Halloween and puts its stamp down. This is like the definitive Halloween movie now. It's like Christmas Story being like, yeah, this is the Christmas movie that is going to last a generation.
That's true. That is a good parallel. You know what I mean? It's such a classic, simple, timeless story of like crazy guy escapes from an institution, goes back to his hometown, starts killing people. Cool. We're good, you know?
Kind of, I was blown away by how simple this movie is.
Yeah, even the filmmaking is just very elegant and simple. I saw you wrote down in your notes how the movie doesn't show off, and it's very, very true. This movie does not sniff its own farts at all. It's very atmospheric. It takes its time. I mean, I'm sure, you know, it has a lot of, you know, what are considered cliches, right? There's a lot of just the basics of like, you thought you killed the killer, but he gets back up. But we got to understand, like, this movie started a lot of that.
Well, that's what's interesting about talking about movies like this, right? Because you're like, oh, that's a cliche I've seen many times, but you got to like kind of remind yourself of like, oh, no, but like all those like what have become cliches is because of this movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I remember the first time you and I watched Seven Samurai together a while ago. This was during lockdown, and I think we're talking about it afterwards. They're just like, oh, this has like the team up sequence that you see in heist movies. This has like this scene that feels very similar to this scene in war movies or whatever. And then you and I had to remind ourselves, I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of those filmmakers are probably inspired by movies that were inspired by Seven Samurai.
Exactly.
Like it feels like that's, yeah. So it's always interesting talking about those kind of movies because you just got to like put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah, but there's still so many shots that hold up tremendously well. Like,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you know, all like you and I both freaked out over it during the reaction too. Like just those little moments when you just see Michael's mask kind of fade in from the darkness and you hear like a little sting.
I think what really stood out to me during this watch, and when we did it for the Nice Dude Movie Night channel, is I wrote this down in my notes. It doesn't take that much for this movie to grip you. And John Carpenter's been like a master of that in his entire career. A handful of times he misses, but he's so good at setting up the most simple shot or the simple music cue that will grip you immediately. It like doesn't take much. Simple stuff like the friends, like Linda or whatever, going to the kitchen, getting like cereal or whatever.
Yeah.
Stuff like that will like show the shot of her walking to the kitchen, getting this stuff, walking back. In no music, nothing happens, and you just feel horrible.
Yeah, you feel the tension because you know someone's lurking around, which they established earlier that, you know. And the thing that's also creepy about Michael is how much he is openly stalking them. Like he'll very like confidently just stand there staring right back if you catch him.
Yeah, and then the scary movie joke is that
Runs
you
away
never
really
watch him run away, but it would be funny if you did.
Yeah, exactly. But and it works for Halloween because like they clearly give Michael this mystic element. You know?
Yeah,
it's
like,
natural, you know, and we don't have to fully get into it because everything's been said, right?
he's not a he's an it.
Exactly. And so I think it works for this movie in particular of him disappearing because like he does have like you don't fully understand if he's supernatural or not, which is what's so cool about this movie that is like nearly 50 years old. This movie is pretty fucking old now, that like people still to this day kind of try to get a read on Michael and his personality and why he does what he does. And, you know, the sequels try to establish that lore, but they never really get it right because the first movie doesn't bother explaining.
This movie came out 1978.
Yeah.
And it has things in it that hold up so well. And it costs about $300,000 adjusted for inflation. Looked it up. I don't know how accurate these numbers are because you really never know.
Yeah.
But Google searches cost $300,000 adjusted for inflation today. That'd be a $1.2 million budget. Insane.
Yeah.
For a movie that looks this good and is this effective and was this influential. Total box office for this movie, $70 million. Adjusted for inflation, $200 million.
Wow.
I mean, the only comparison to today with those numbers is Get Out.
Yeah.
We did Nope recently, and I was talking about how, like, it's such a great comparison for Jordan Peele and John Carpenter, because it feels like kind of a similar trajectory. Coming out with a movie that was this low-budget, independent thing that came out of nowhere, and it started an entire genre and changed the genre, and gave the filmmaker a blank check to kind of make whatever he wants. And it's I feel like today's John Carpenter is Jordan Peele in that way.
Sure. Yeah. I can definitely see the comparisons.
But you want to start with just like the opening scene.
Sure. Yeah. That famous oneer.
We don't have to go like in order with this entire movie, but I think it's important to talk about that oneer.
Yeah. It has a lot of, it's a famous moment. Yeah. Showing the perspective of the killer right in the opening too.
I mean, it's straight up been parodied with, not only parody movies, but also with like in Blowout. Brian De Palma's Blowout starts with like, because John Travolta's character in that movie does sound and does Foley work, his character is that. Mm-hmm. The movie opens with a very like Michael Myers-esque style oneer opening of him looking through a window, and then someone calls like, hey, cut this out. It cuts to John Travolta editing the movie.
Gotcha. Okay, that's cool.
But like the influence of this scene is just everywhere.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, like, even, I honestly, which came first, Jaws or this movie?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Because they both, you get where I'm going with that, right? Because they both have the POV.
It had to be Jaws, because I think Close Encounters came out a year before this.
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, you get what I'm saying though, in the sense that they both have the POV of the monster to kind of give it another element besides just showing like it.
Yeah, Jaws came out in 1975. I just looked it up.
Got it. Okay, because there's an effective build-up too. It's not just there for just to be like, oh, let's make it creepy and build suspense, which it does, but also the reveal afterwards that it was a little kid too.
So I am always shocked by that moment.
Yeah.
Right? There's obviously like him stabbing his sister, who is nearly nude.
Yeah.
It's like, Michael. And then like when he's stabbing her, she's making like noises that out of context could feel sexual in a way too, which I know you put that down in your notes, and I think you should talk about that later on in the movie too.
Sure.
But that shot when it's revealed that it's a kid, it's so jarring because you just straight up see a little kid, but he's holding a knife, and it's just like the most innocent looking kid ever.
Yeah, they got this like little blonde kid.
That's such a striking shot that even to this day I don't see in horror movies.
Yeah.
Like, and I think the reason it's so effective is that they don't put any blood on the kid. They don't put any sort of disfigurement on the kid. It looks like a genuine 6-year-old innocent kid.
Yeah, in suburbia, essentially.
I just don't think movies nowadays would take that kind of risk and go that dark.
Yeah, well, I think...
Because he doesn't look creepy. He doesn't look like one of those kids where like, that kid's fucked up.
He's like damaged, yeah.
Yeah, it just looks like any other kid in suburbia, which is the point of the movie.
Which is the big problem I have with the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween. I won't go into a full rant because I'm sure everything's, that could be said has been said. But do you know anything about the Rob Zombie?
I don't know anything about it, so feel free to...
Okay, I'll give you, an abridged version.
Yeah. You're the Michael Myers pseudo-expert here, so yeah.
But in the Rob Zombie remake, they add like an extra half hour of the movie of Michael Myers' backstory. Have you heard about any of that?
No. Again, nothing about it.
Absolutely nothing. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
They give him like an absolute, like kind of like a white trash background. And where he has like a stripper mom, his stepdad's like an absolute piece of shit,
Sounds bad.
Yeah. Well, here they tried to frame Michael as like a tragic, like maybe like almost like like a taxi driver kind of thing, where maybe if he got the help he needed, he wouldn't have turned out the way he did.
I mean, I think it's interesting to like look at it as like a comic book interpretation of a different style.
Yeah.
You know how like Frank Miller's Batman versus other Batmans are different?
Yeah.
It's interesting to just be like, okay, how do I want Michael Myers to be?
Yeah, exactly. And so they basically made it where Michael, to take out his stress, is like upstairs killing little animals like his rats, and then he's just hurting little animals, and then Dr. Loomis is in it, he knows about him, and he's like, this is often seen as an early warning sign.
Is it Donald Pleasence? Is it the guy who's played?
No, it was Malcolm McDowell who plays Dr. Loomis. Which he's on paper, he's actually a good cast for like a modern day Dr. Loomis, right?
Sure. He's got the eyes for it.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically though, so they basically show Michael as a little kid snapping, and they have this whole sequence where he kills him, and it's a lot more bloody and and then he gets institutionalized. And it kind of leads to the reenactment of the events where he hasn't spoken a word since then. They made Michael Myers huge in it too. He's like 7 feet.
Oh, you know what? I think you might have told me that aspect of it.
Yeah, they made him big as hell.
Right. Yeah, so that's interesting because I haven't seen the movies, so I don't really want to outwardly judge them without seeing them. But everything you're saying about them is kind of the opposite reason of why I like this movie.
That's kind of what everyone kind of agrees on. There are people that do like the remake of it for sure from a different lens, but yeah, I think, most like hardcore horror purists are probably like, that goes against, everything that Michael is. You don't want to explain it. That's the whole, that takes away everything that he is.
I guess eventually if you're doing sequels, everyone wants to kind of break it down.
Do something new
It's
with
hard
it.
to do a sequel without doing that, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah, like where else do you take Michael? Because he's such a blank slate of a character.
yeah, it's a kind of the reason why I wonder if that's why John Carpenter never like actually directed any of the sequels. He always stayed as a producer.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think what's amazing about that opening and going forward is that you just can't understand it.
Yeah.
When you see that shot of the parents looking at Michael, you just don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
According to the sources, this is all unexpected. Like, the sister didn't expect Michael to go in there and do that.
Oh yeah, the parents didn't expect, the way they're like, he's like wearing a suit. All of that's like intentional to give it like this classic suburban home life to feel so like quote unquote like normal,
So did one night evil just consume him?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know. And that's what's really scary and dreadful about it.
Yeah. And he kind of stayed that way too afterwards. Like his plans, you don't really know. His killings are seemingly random and his theatricalities behind them are seemingly random. Like he goes after specifically these teenage girls. Could have slaughtered anyone that he saw, but he drove all the way out back home. Probably didn't kill anyone on the way except for the mechanic whose outfit he stole.
It's not a revenge tale.
Yeah.
It's like, you could make it that. I'm glad this movie didn't. But like, okay, he's come back home and he obviously, his motives are going after people that are engaging in sexual activity, especially teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, you're just really not sure.
Yeah.
And then even towards the ending when he's unmasked, you still can't read him.
Yeah.
So it's what I love about it. It's what's scary about it, and still what holds up to that at the time is just that mystery.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's interesting because I remember, when I was first investigating this movie a little bit, because at this point I was a little more familiar with like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street,
And how old were you at this point?
Like college territory. When I was getting more into that stuff, I remember like everyone always talks about Michael like he's just, oh, he's evil. That's all he is.
He's the shape.
Exactly. And I remember thinking like, well, what makes him more evil? Like, how come he's more evil, than Freddy Krueger or whatever, right? And I think I looked into it on Reddit and there was like a whole thread of people just saying like, well, because the lack of motive makes it more like, any of the other characters who like, there's like clearly a cathartic pleasure. You can say like, Freddy Krueger gets out of torturing his victims in their dreams and all this stuff. There's always like a thing you can explain, but Michael just sort of does it. He doesn't even seem excited to kill people. He just does it.
Well, and we're always going to be afraid of something we don't understand.
Yeah.
And so we talked about this in the Note podcast too, is how like, I kept saying, and you kept saying that there's like the chaotic aspects of nature and things we can't understand. There's going to be always things that are always going to be out of our control. And Michael, in a way, feels that way. And so...
Yeah, I mean, John Carpenter himself describes Michael as like a force of nature kind of thing. Like he's more than just a man, essentially.
This is why Michael Myers feels like the ultimate like John Carpenter character. Because I think what... John Carpenter's always been someone to be like, strip it down, break it down. There's like, don't try to read into it. There might be something deeper here, but I'm not going to explain that to you. And I'm sure as hell not going to talk about it in interviews. But like, also, my movies are not going to... Like, I mean, They Live and Big Trouble are flashy, but those are the point of it. But I was just like, most of his movies are stripped down in the way. If you look at Escape from New York, it's such a big premise that's actually pretty stripped down.
Sure.
And so Michael Myers feels like the ultimate version of that. He was just like, no, I think we're always going to be... Like, this movie came out in 1978. Like you said, people are still trying to break it down. That's going to continue to happen because this movie doesn't allow any way to enter.
Yeah, it's like, it's like the classic, Michael's everywhere and nowhere at the same time, which is what they do really beautifully at the very end when they cut to all the different locations and you hear his breathing throughout,
Yeah, man.
And it's funny because, the video game Dead by Daylight?
You've talked about it before
Yeah,
to me,
it's-
but I haven't played it.
For listeners or viewers who don't know, it's basically like an online interactive slasher movie. Like basically 4 or 5 players play as survivors and are trying to escape.
Yeah,
One
I've
player is
watched
like the
you play
killer.
it. Like I've been
Exactly.
on the couch watching you play it.
And Michael Myers is a playable character if you purchase him. And because every killer that you play as has different gameplay mechanics of how they work, how fast they are, how strong they are, and what their strengths and weaknesses.
Sure.
For when you play as Michael, you can charge up his strength, because if you do a normal attack, it does average damage. But if you're watching them without attacking them or anything and hold down a button, you're charging up your strength. So basically, it encourages you to stalk them before you go up for it and attack them. So it feels like they capture the essence of Michael Myers. Like he stalks them before killing them.
Wow.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah. It's funny that Michael Myers is this like slasher icon.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but he's nothing like the other like slashers out there.
Yeah.
Like he's not Jason, he's not Freddy.
Yeah, it's not Leatherface.
Because they're all like very like active and they're all like it's easy to just dress up as them and like really get after it. But Michael's like very stoic and still. And like I don't know if I put it down in my notes, but the first kill doesn't happen in 50 minutes because like 50 minutes into the movie you get the first kill, which is the car kill.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite kill in the entire movie. And it's because 75% of the movie he's just like watching people.
Yeah.
He's just observing, taking his time.
He's not theatrical with his kills. He's theatrical with his like presentation and scaring his victims for sure. Like, how obviously by the end how he sets up Judith Myers' grave and creates a kind of like a little pseudo haunted house for Laurie to experience.
Yeah, that's the closest thing this movie has to an actual like horror set piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it feels like a haunted house.
But he's not like Jason where he like twists their head all the way around or he
Yeah.
does all that shit.
And I'm not dissing the Friday the 13th movies. Those are the fun of those movies.
Yeah.
But I don't go into Halloween being like the kills, even though the kills are great. I go into it, to be honest, for those first 50 minutes. If you watch It Follows exists only because of Halloween.
Sure, yeah.
It Follows, the whole movie is them like, these guys are really far away, and you don't know if they're coming after you, but you're just watching them from really far away.
I got 2 questions for you.
Go
and
ahead.
they naturally lead to each other. These 2 questions are very, they're complementary. Okay, so the first question is: have you ever seen or experienced evil, like truest, just pure evil? Whether and just maybe not experienced directly with you, but have you seen it from afar or on TV or anything like that? My second question is: what's your favorite Halloween candy?
Oh, they do transition well.
I know it's a big question, so take your time.
No, I haven't like firsthand experienced like evil.
Or do you think there is even such a thing as evil? Because I know it's so subjective, right? But do you think that, or do you think it's more complicated than that?
Well, honestly, with stuff happening in Israel and Palestine and all that stuff right now, I mean, I'm sure those people would argue, yes, there is such thing as evil. But so it's like I don't want to say that I've experienced it. I've seen it happen on the news.
But you believe it exists, essentially.
100%.
Yeah, same here. I think.
And I think 100%. And I think it happens around the world all the time.
Yeah.
It's through different avenues. It doesn't have to be like terrorist acts or anything like that. It can just be like the stuff that I get anxious about a lot is like how tech giants control the way we communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And how little they genuinely really think about us as people.
Yeah.
That to me is a sense of evil.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because I agree. I do think evil isn't just like violence, physical violence, there's also just as much like mental and political violence essentially that people commit. Like in my opinion, like if I'm sure you've heard plenty of horror stories of like, narcissistic abusers, right? Who aren't physically violent, but I would still argue some people like that are evil because they go so much out of their way to ruin someone's mental health and their life and, the way they perceive the world. Like to me, that's just as evil or just as much considered evil.
Totally. My favorite Halloween candy is Reese's Pieces. I just want to get that out of the way.
Yeah. Just to move on to the next
not Reese's
question.
Pieces. Sorry, no, that's dumb. I like Reese's Pieces, but Reese's peanut butter cups.
Okay, the cups. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Reese's peanut butter cups, but they like are heavy. Like I can only eat like one or two. Then I'm like, I can't have any more candy after this.
Dude, I'll knock out so many. It's so like, especially if it's the mini ones, I'll take out so
You
many.
are better with heavier foods than I am. It's weird because
Chocolate specifically.
That's true. Yes, chocolate.
It's like a big weakness.
I think mine is a Kit Kat.
It's like one of the best like candies ever.
Kit Kat is it's delicious.
They
it's
really, I think I told you this before, but I'm like, they figured it out when they made that candy.
You know what candy I also got a little addicted to recently? Because my girlfriend and I went on a little trip for a couple days and we bought some candy, just to bring to the hotel. Is those Nerds clusters, those gummy clusters.
I called you on the phone one time. We were discussing something to do with Nice Dude, and you were like, sorry, I almost choked on a Nerds cluster. And I'm like, all right, man.
I tried eating one while you were talking to me. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes it'll be like a gamble whether or not like your sentence is going to go on for a while, so I have time to have a little snack.
Yeah.
Or if it's going to end really quickly and I'm in the middle of chewing and I'm like, oh fuck, like I got caught. But this time I outed myself because of those little gummy clusters I almost choked on.
Okay, so I think going back to talking about just like evil experience of the world. Obviously in America, I want to correct myself, especially during lockdown, seeing like how quickly people resorted to racism when it comes to like actual worldwide disease and stuff like that. And seeing how like the George Floyd stuff really went down and that stuff is like you just open up the news and you see it. Yeah. So like it's hard for me to just deny that there's evil that exists in the world.
Yeah.
It comes in all different forms, like you said, and it's not just violent. But of course evil exists.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember, I won't describe some stuff I've seen on Facebook and stuff in my youth, but I'm sure you've seen the same and listeners have seen the same. I'm sure you've seen some gnarly cartel videos out there.
Yeah.
And again, I won't get fully into it because I don't feel like it. But that's another exposure I've had to evil where when you see certain horrible atrocities being committed and you see how casual people are about it in the videos, how they'll just be joking around like it's another day at the office at work. That to me is more disturbing than any of the shit that they're doing.
Well, that's okay. Great point, because that's what this entire movie's about.
Yeah.
This entire movie is about, it doesn't have to take place in bumfuck nowhere. Yeah. What I said in my synopsis, it's not just the Texas Chainsaw Massacre situation where you stopped at the wrong gas station.
Yeah, it's in a perfectly wholesome neighborhood.
It's so clean and nice. The age 6 Michael Myers looks like an innocent kid. And I think the modern day equivalent of us ignoring the fucked up shit happened and we are comfortable in our own lives. Yeah. The modern day equivalent of someone turning the light on to Laurie Strode and turning it off again is opening up your phone and seeing another missile strike goes down in Israel. Yeah. And then scroll up. Here's how to make the perfect pie. That's the modern day equivalent of that. It's just that like it's so easy to just be like, oh, like that simple swipe up movement is the modern day equivalent of turning on the light to something horrible, turning it off.
Yeah, I mean, I know you haven't been there, but I'm sure I've told you about it. You know the Museum of Death?
Yes, I've heard about it from you and
other
like just
people
looking into it.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating museum. It's not. I don't recommend it for the faint of heart at all. There's a lot of pictures of
because it's the Museum of Death.
Yeah, exactly. But it shows like real life photos of corpses and gore and stuff like that. But it's clearly not there for like shock value as much as it sounds like it is. It's very much like a place of just like, in my opinion, kind of like what you're talking about though. Seeing it at least a little bit, in my opinion, can be important. At least I hold that opinion. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with that, but I do think that like when you read on the news, someone, did something really violent, someone shot themselves or something really, really horrible, right? It's very different than the significance of actually seeing it, and to me, it really hones it in for you. Yeah. To show you the severity of it, to kind of put into perspective for you and teach you to respect life and to have compassion for other people and to, you know what I mean? Be more careful, whether it's like driving on the road. There are certain things that in my head that it kind of does for you a little bit, when you actually see it firsthand, because a lot of people do kind of dodge it. But again, not everyone, like I'm not recommending everyone go to the Museum of Death. It's a pretty gnarly place. And if you can't handle it, that's totally fine.
Everyone has their own barometer for those kind of things of what they can handle and what they can. But it's important to like know your range and try to expose yourself to the cruelties of the world, because when you do that, you can have perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see a balanced point of view.
You don't have to go to the Museum of Death to do that, if that's not something you think you can handle. But it's important not to shut your eyes to it, because I think that's what this movie's about, is that like you can get super comfortable in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so much so that when there's crazy stuff happening out there, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, you know what I mean? You can get into that mode really quickly. I mean, like, I remember reading an article this morning about like Hurricane Helene happening and just like really destroying North Carolina.
Oh, it's horrible, yeah.
And obviously we've seen a lot more like hurricanes and storms this year.
Disasters.
The weather this year has been weird. It's like been like climate change has been the slow brewing doom, but this year especially it feels like it's hit harder. And Hurricane Helen was happening, and it's like everyone was like, damn, this is real, we got to figure some shit out. And this article was talking about how like hurricanes started slowing down, North Carolina is like destroyed in a really big way, and immediately people have like moved on.
Yeah.
Aside from the people that like lived in places that were deeply affected,
but everyone else you're talking about that found out online or read about it or saw a video about it. Or
like we all got super upset and scared.
Yeah.
It didn't happen to us, and we're fine. And it's just amazing that a movie that came out in 1978 still connects in that way.
Yeah.
And this is a slasher movie, but that is so simple, that costs $300,000 and has the most on paper simple setups, but means so much that way when you really read into it.
Yeah, it's very bare bones. I think if you had to summarize, for me at least, John Carpenter's essence is kind of just, I guess like pure, if that makes any sense.
What do you mean?
Like, he doesn't really like to add a lot of bells and whistles to his movies. He likes to just be like, okay, this is an evil person, cool. Like, what you were saying before of how like that he keeps it very simple for Michael Myers. Like, I remember Nick Castle, the actor who actually played Michael Myers.
Mm-hmm.
He apparently was like trying to pitch different body language things and different little quirks to give Michael, because he was like wanted him to be insane. Like, how do we do this? And John Carpenter kept telling him, pull it back, just be efficient, walk, don't add any other flares to it. It's weird, like when you hear about actors who play as like masked, slasher killers.
Yeah.
How like, the weird, like you have to have body language at the same time, but not too much. Like, Kane Hodder is famous for playing as Jason Voorhees, and he added like a lot of kind of personality quirks that really solidified him separate from the others.
And then obviously Robert Englund with Freddy Krueger and stuff like that. And Freddy Krueger requires a little bit more.
He has a face, he has a voice, and he's probably the biggest stinker of all the.
Yeah,
he's the biggest troll. The way he stretches his arms all the way across, and he's like running after her.
Yeah, he's the definition of a stinker. Yeah. I also wonder if a lot of the reason why John Carpenter wanted to be like, pull it back, was obviously he understood what the story needed, right? He's a great filmmaker. But I wonder if a lot of it was because like, listen, man, this is a really low budget movie. If we try to overstep any boundaries, then it's going to look like it was made for cheap.
That's interesting.
So let's stay within the box that we have. And I think for that reason, whenever John Carpenter, his whole career has always complained about not having enough money. And he kind of works his best when he's like working for cheap a little bit.
That's true, yeah.
Aside from maybe The Thing is when he like was like, I got more money now, I'm gonna use it on making some of the most revolutionary practical effects ever made.
Yeah.
And The Thing is probably the one movie where I'm just like, it was a great balance between like, we're gonna show you things you've never seen before with a lot of flair.
Yeah.
And also that stripped down style, which is like, you don't know why they're in Antarctica. You can't explain anything that's going on. And at the end of the day, they're just like, burn the lab, we're all dying.
Yeah. It's very timeless for that reason.
And it's what he does in Halloween from the very beginning. He's always been that way. It's why I love him.
Do you want to talk about the famous stab against the wall kill, like Bob's death?
Can we talk about the car scene first?
Oh, yeah. We touched on it. Yeah, but let's get it further into it.
Let's do the kills.
That's your favorite kill. When he chokes her to death with his bare hand, and you just hear his breathing, and the window's foggy. I like even like this before the kill actually happens, like before the jump scare, how the door was locked and she had to go and get the key. and then she didn't even need the key. Do you remember how she just opened it and it just popped right open?
No.
Like, you don't even, like, Michael just got in there.
And Annie is just like seeing like, why is there so much steam on the windows? Huh?
Yeah, all the fog.
And there's no close up or insert when Michael appears. It stays on wide, and Michael comes from the darkness. It's a really well lit scene to pull that off, to where I'm always pausing and I'm like, can I see Michael anywhere there? And I can't.
Yeah.
So they hit him really well. And a few things I like about this: the simplicity of it. One arm.
Yeah. Just one hand.
The shot of like from outside the car, the steam, and it's kind of like he's looking at her when he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, just like, interesting, what's going on here?
He's like analyzing her death.
Yeah, like while it's happening. And it's just that's it. That's why that scene explains why that movie is scary to me.
Yeah.
Why this movie still is scary to me is because it's like so matter of fact. I mean, obviously, the actress who's playing Annie is doing a lot of work. Her eyes are bugging out, and she's like screaming.
All those little noises she's making, until she's honking the horn too, and no one notices or even attempts to.
And
like...
it cuts to an exterior shot of you hear the blaring in the background, but
Yeah.
no one goes to check it out. And it's the definition of why this movie works for me. That scene.
Yeah. My favorite kill is probably Bob's.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, Bob.
I love Bob's death.
Bob played by, I have him here. Bob Sims played by John Michael Graham.
Well, good for you, John Michael Graham. You get probably like one of the most famous deaths, and you also, your character's so nasty too.
Yeah.
That's always the thing I love. Just side note is how excited they are to have sex.
They're so pumped.
Like every chance they get, they're always like, "Okay, let's go." You know, no, they're not coming home. They're like running to the bedroom.
Granted, at that age.
Yeah, I know. That's what's kind of fun about it.
Yeah.
And how he's like, "I'm gonna go get a beer. Don't get dressed."
I know. It almost seems like he's parodying a scene from like Halloween, even though this is the first Halloween movie.
He plays like the most like kind of stereotypical teenager in a slasher movie.
Yeah, and
I was watching it with my girlfriend. Both the car choke scene and the wall stab made her jump. Like every time, like, you know, he actually jumped out and the sound effect happened, she was like, "Oh my god!" Like they still work.
And she's seen the movie before.
No. The first time watching him.
This was her first time
I
watching
just showed him
Halloween.
yeah, I just showed him to her like a couple nights ago.
She liked it.
Yeah, she did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And so yeah, like I said, both jump scares they worked for her. You know.
Okay, that's good to know, because talk about that kill. Why is it so effective to you?
I think, you know.
I mean, it's an iconic kill, so it's not just you, but like,
yeah, for sure. I think it's just so timeless. Like it's so classic. You know what I mean? It's just the way, even down to him lifting him up against the wall too. How there's that shot of his feet rising. You're like, oh shit, this guy's strong. It's like you learn something else about Michael as the scene goes, and then the slow rise of the knife, and then it's like.
And what I wrote in my notes for that kill is like, it's like the first glimpse of his personality, because it cuts to that wide, and it's that famous head tilt that you've referenced to me so often in our friendship. You're like, oh my god! And then when he tilts his head,
the lighting too. It's just like
it's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
But when he tilts his head, it's like the first time you see oh, that's a person in there. But he's curious, like what's going on here. I just love the idea. Who came up with the head tilt? Was it John Carpenter? Was it a Nick Castle? I don't know.
Yeah, but it was genius.
But it was so smart, and they never explain it, and it's never like. And maybe in the sequels, you get to learn a little bit about where Michael's from and everything. But the idea that he's like kind of interested.
Yeah. Well, some people have interpreted it like, you know, he's like looking at his work of art or something like that.
Sure.
You know, and some people look at it as like you mentioned before, where he's almost like examining death. You know what I mean?
And then why does he put a bed sheet and glasses on?
I know that's the other thing too. Is like
it's really funny. It still holds up, but like, why does he do that?
Because he wants to just like torment his victims. You know what I mean?
But does he want to torment them?
I think so a little. I mean, he wouldn't go out of his way to pose the dead bodies and stuff for Laurie Strode if he didn't want to get some kick out of it. You know what I mean?
Part of me is like, is he still like a kid that likes Halloween? So he still wants to dress up, and then he wants to create his own haunted house for Laurie. Like, does he still enjoy the spirit of spooky season while also being an evil murderer?
Is Michael Myers a Disney adult?
Well, let's talk about it. Do you know what I mean?
No, totally. Yeah. I mean, I've actually heard theories about that he's still kind of a little kid in there, you know, just because. And also, like, he still has this kind of repressed sexual curiosity Obviously, like, the shots of the girls changing, you see him just kind of standing there coldly watching. I wrote it down in the notes too. I do think Michael Myers is a bit of a stinker in this movie. He has a couple little cheeky moments like that. Yeah, especially like putting on the sheet with Bob's glasses is fucking hilarious. If you really picture Michael just like, okay, hang on, I'm gonna open this cabinet, get this sheet on, to go to Bob's body hanging on the wall, take his glasses, put it over.
Oh yeah, there's so much setup there. I mean, it's dark, but taking like his sister's tombstone and putting it above the head and making it feel like a set piece.
Yeah, exactly.
All that stuff. I'm trying to like pick and choose what to talk about next.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the next kill after? How he kills the girl with the telephone wire?
Sure. I don't know not much to say about it.
Not much else to say about that, so maybe we don't really have to get into it. But
I mean, it is okay. This is where we can transition, though. It's like the first interaction he has with Laurie Strode.
That's true. Yeah, when there's a famous shot that's also a GIF, and I sent you this
picking
GIF.
up the phone.
Yeah, I'm just kind of holding up the phone.
Yeah, it's their first connection, and so I think now let's transition into talking a little bit about Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned Jamie Lee Curtis. We're like practically an hour in. Video versions, you can see my girl Jamie behind me right
My
here.
girl Jamie. Excuse me, it's my girl.
Oh, yours?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was ours, man.
I mean, she can be ours, but I have been on this. I don't know, man.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. You can have her.
Yeah. I thought that was my thing. I love Jamie. No. We, all jokes aside. Okay, I just want to say Jamie Lee Curtis, daughter of Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho. Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of amazing that she ended up being someone that was like a scream queen as well.
Yeah.
Love Jamie Lee Curtis. She is just
She's a queen.
She's one of my favorite like movie stars, but also just one of my favorite people. I get excited every time she's in a movie. She has like an amazing presence, whether it be in a comedy or in like a horror genre. And she's considered as one of the first Final Girls.
Yeah, she is. And
I mean, Texas Chainsaw is technically that,
well,
but even Texas Chainsaw feels like its own kind of island a little bit.
It's own island, and I think we're gonna cover Texas Chainsaw later, so we'll get deeper into it.
Yeah, we're covering it this month.
But the big difference between those two in terms of Final Girl is that Texas Chainsaw is mostly luck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Sally, I believe her character's name.
Yeah.
She escapes just because she was lucky enough that a truck happened to be driving by and she got on it. It could be argued about Laurie Strode is that her character was considered like morally pure. Essentially, she just wasn't having premarital sex. And that's really the core of it, of its old school traditional values of like what, they believe Michael Myers to be.
Yeah. And it's kind of still shocking when I put on Halloween and it says introducing Jamie Lee Curtis.
I know.
I never really picked up on the fact is that the main thing about her is that she is the most like, put together perfect suburban girl conservative person. The way she's dressed up is like she's not like into showing any skin. She is someone that is not like going after boys, even though part of her is like, man, everyone else is having a good time. Yeah. And I'm not. And her friends are like, well, I asked out this guy for you. And she's like, no, you didn't. You're going to have to tell him no. I'm not doing that. And
like her friends are teasing her kind of the whole movie.
She's the Girl Scout.
Yeah.
She's babysitting. And the whole point of the movie is that like Michael is going after all the girls that are having premarital sex, right? But Laurie at the end is the final girl.
Yeah.
And it's just like it comes back to the theme of the movie is like, you think you're safe. You think you can be living in a suburban, safe household, this idyllic life, the perfect girl, don't have sex, right? You can still be the victim of evil.
Yeah.
Evil doesn't choose. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it could even be argued that she got lucky at the end too, just like Sally from Texas Chainsaw, because Dr. Loomis just happened to come in with a gun.
Yeah.
Which people have kind of goofed on how long it took for Dr. Loomis to notice the car that was parked like right there.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
Which, I mean, Dr. Loomis in general, I always, we haven't even talked about him yet or anything, which I don't
We'll get to.
Yeah, I won't sidetrack it, but it's definitely, I think it started that classic trope really. And now it's just been used again and again of like the nice girl is the one that survives the horror movie.
She's so brilliant in those last 15 minutes, especially.
Oh yeah. Especially like when she escapes the house and is like screaming for help.
I've always thought about how hard it must be for an actor to sell fear.
Yeah.
Right? Like to genuinely sell like fear. Because like there's so much stuff going on in a movie, especially with this movie. They probably had limited time to shoot. There were like things were probably fucking up a lot. And for Jamie Lee Curtis, when she's in that room with all her dead friends, and when Michael shows up from the darkness, that is real, genuine fear.
Yeah. Then when Michael jumps out, how she falls down the stairs.
Yeah, and I think it's the only comparison I have to someone pulling it off like that is Sally from Texas Chainsaw. When she's in that truck crying, like you genuinely feel like her life's not going to be the same.
Oh yeah, she's like laughing too. Like, yeah, I want to talk about Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah,
so bad. I love that movie so much.
Again, we're getting to it.
We'll get to it. Yeah, a couple weeks.
But yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis, not a false moment in this movie, especially those last 15 minutes. And yeah, the iconic, like she's running and trying to get help, and we already talked about that. But I think before we move on to like other characters, like I want to talk about Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
What's your like Jamie Lee Curtis movie?
Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my introduction to her, I think, as a kid. I do love Everything Everywhere All at Once as well, and she's brilliant in that movie.
She is really good in it. I think it's a kind of weird because now I feel like people underrate that performance because she won the Oscar. Because a lot of people feel that like, oh man, that should have been the Angela Bassett win for Black Panther, and it was a weird win for her to do Everything Everywhere. But when you rewatch that movie, she's kind of brilliant in that movie.
She's pretty perfect in that movie, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not just like a silly like wig and everything. It's not like a silly performance. Like that like final conversation between her and Michelle Yeoh really hits you.
Yeah, she made her sympathetic, that character.
Yeah.
But yeah, Freaky Friday is my Jamie Lee Curtis movie.
Probably for me too. I think probably for a lot of people our generation.
I thought you were going to say Trading Places.
I mean... I think the horny Altaf probably goes more towards True Lies, funny enough.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can see that.
Anyways, I love her. She's great. You want to talk about Loomis?
Hell yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to read the speech.
You're just going to read it?
Yeah, I think we should just read it. This is just a speech I think about all the time. It is one of the most iconic like horror movie like monologues, I feel like. I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding. And even the most rudimentary sense of life or death. Of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face, and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simple evil.
Yeah.
Explain to me why this is not cheesy. Why this works. Why a guy just being like, this guy's really evil works so well.
I think, well, obviously his delivery and his acting just
Donald Pleasence is amazing in this movie.
Yeah, like it was built up too, because like, you know, right after you see him as a child kill his sister, how it just cuts right to, you know, him and that nurse lady in the car together. They're driving over, and he's trying to even build up, saying like, you know, we need to give him these drugs before we put him in front of court because it's the only thing we can do to keep him still. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one of the scary shots in that scene is like just the patients roaming in the darkness.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like, you know, at this point we don't really have a full grasp on Michael, and we never do the entire movie, obviously, but that's kind of what Loomis is illustrating, that you do not have a grasp on him, and you believe it because you're seeing it throughout the movie. At this point, he's already stalking Laurie.
Yeah,
he's already doing all this stuff, and you feel the danger that this, you know, that Haddonfield is in.
So when he's talking to Brackett and giving that speech, it feels earned, you're saying.
Exactly. That's really the core of it. It's very earned.
Yeah, because it's
hard to do when you have characters that hype up other characters. You know, someone's like, look how brilliant this person is. Look how smart they are.
You know what I equated to? I equated to John Wick. When
yeah, exactly, the Baba Yaga.
The first John Wick, you're curious about what's this guy's deal. The movie opens in media res of him already injured. You know it's going to be an action movie. You've seen the trailer. You know what it's going to be. He was a hitman or whatever.
Yeah.
His wife dies. He has his dog. It's really emotional. His dog gets killed. We all know the story. Now, we are still curious about him. We see the shots of him in the shower and all these tattoos. Now, we're starting to have a lot of questions. So when it cuts to the dad just being like, you don't know what you just did.
Well, yeah, he says he's the one you send to kill the fucking boogeyman.
He's the one you sent to kill. Yeah, that's the line. That's the line. So it's like, the questions have been built up enough for you to earn that monologue.
Exactly. So it's kind of the same energy for this one, for sure.
It's like with any exposition scene, right? Like if you're going to give it, if you're going to have like a character we're going to stop the movie and just stay on a close-up of a guy just explaining this guy's deal.
Yeah.
You got to earn that moment. It's the whole reason why Morpheus is able to sit on a couch and just explain the concept of the movie, because for the first 20 minutes we have all these questions.
Or like an Alien too, and I admire its purity.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, it's a trick that is extremely hard to pull off.
Yeah.
What you really have to do is have a damn fucking good story engine and premise in the beginning of it for you to pull off a scene like this.
Yeah, and Donald Pleasence is in the first like 6 Halloween movies too.
I mean, Loomis in general is such like a icon. I love him. I love that speech, but then I also love how like he also likes Halloween. He like scares those kids and he gets kind of excited about it. I love how everyone has like the spirit of the season.
He's like hiding behind the bushes, like, hey, get out of there.
And even Brackett, he's like, everyone deserves one good scare.
Yeah. Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
That's what it is.
They say that line again in Halloween Kills, by the way.
Oh, that's cool.
They're,
I like that.
this angry mob surrounds Michael Myers.
I haven't seen Halloween Kills.
Oh,
I want to see it.
I'm describing it for you.
Right.
Oh, you do not want me to
No,
spoil
no,
it?
you can spoil it. It's fine, but I will see it.
An angry mob tries to kill Michael, and they lead like a trap, and Michael comes out without his mask, and then they all come out. They have bats and guns, and do 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 do, this hardcore music, like, oh, look, they're getting him. And then I think it's supposed to be Brackett, if I remember correct, is standing there with a gun, and he's just like, everyone's entitled to one good scare before they start fighting him.
So what's always funny about those kind of things to me is that it can work well or it can't, right? Yeah. Like when Harrison Ford in Force Awakens says, I have a really bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
You're like, yay, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's a casual line because it's so casual.
It's cute. Yeah.
It's so casual that it makes sense for him to say it again, that he just says that. It's fine. But when someone like Brackett years later says everyone's entitled, like, it's so specific that it makes me feel like, did he remember that he said that to Laurie and he knew it was iconic? So he's like, let me bring it back.
Yeah, if you really break down the lore.
30 years ago, I said this to Laurie. Let me say it again. I should have that.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So
See how often that happens in real life?
I should remember things I said in high school, and then 20 years later, I go back home and say it again. So I'm like, remember when I said it back in high school? I'm saying my iconic line.
I hate to say it, but that does seem like something you would kind of do. Like, if you're really proud of, like, a zinger or something, I feel like you would kind of hold on to it in your head.
I run jokes to the ground all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I can see you, like, years later, hey, I said I would do this thing, now I'm doing it.
Yeah, I turned my life into a legacy sequel. So, yeah. I think that's just really funny to me. It's something that's kind of funny is when I was writing. So the way we do notes for this podcast is we'll watch the movie on our own separately.
Yes.
And I'll create a Google Doc that just has talking points on it. And then I'll send it to you and you'll add your own points, right? And then we'll read through it before we record. And this morning I read through what you wrote down. And you wrote down the score. And then I called you. I'm like, yeah, I forgot to even put down the score as a talking
to talk
point.
about the score?
You want to talk about the score, the music?
Yeah, dude, it's pretty cool.
Done by John Carpenter.
Yeah.
To his chagrin, just because he always talks about how, like, when I became the guy that did everything myself, the studios never wanted to hire someone to do music again because they were just like, he'll do it. So they never wanted they never wanted to give me a budget.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, the music from Michael Myers is just, it's one with his character. Just to me, just as much as like the Imperial March matches Darth Vader,
or just John Williams' score for Jaws is the shark.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think it's the same type of energy that it gives off.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer's score for Batman sounds like Batman to me now.
Exactly. And so watching it again, remember I told you my girlfriend's first time watching it was then, and she noticed like little errors in the playing, like almost like it went out of time occasionally, like a little bit, like quickly.
Ooh.
Like it feels like just kind of a raw recording, which is great. This wasn't a criticism she had. She said, "Oh, I like that it feels handmade.
There's a personality."
Yeah, it feels authentic. It feels like a person made it. The same way when you see special effects that look a little janky and you still like it for that reason. There's a charm to it.
Oh yeah.
And so it was just interesting because now if you hear any other updated scores since the sequels, they had like a little beat behind it and it's very airtight. But the first one has a very, handmade feel to it. And I think they recorded it over the course of like 2 weeks. They did the entire score. Like he had a short amount of time to do it.
It almost feels like it was thought about later.
Yeah.
It was like an afterthought, but it's just like, you can't even imagine, like, I can't imagine them filming this movie without the music in the background.
Exactly.
Like,
I know, exactly. Oh shit. I hit the mic, by the way. Sorry, guys.
It's everything we keep talking about. So I don't want to be repetitive, but it's simple.
Yeah.
It's effective. It doesn't take much.
Well, and also outside of the score, like the little stings, those little sound effects they add in, because obviously everyone knows, like the general music, the do 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 do. but there's a lot of little atmospheric, zingers and sounds and music that just add to the
when he
world.
rises, it's like,
Yeah, or even the high pitch on the little that high sting, and
yeah.
and the little
I mean, we can talk about like the sound design in this movie with the breathing.
Yeah, all of it. It's I almost was going to say music to my ears, but it literally is music, but you get what I'm saying.
And this is, I'm going to say something very cliche, but it's true. It also is effective when it's not used.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I forgot that. I forgot how, like, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, they're really going hard with that music. It's being played a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing Michael Myers watch Laurie and all that stuff. But there's so many sequences, too, where they don't play the music at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And
like during the first car kill scene when he's choking her to death, how they add the sound effect when he jumps out and the sound effect when he cuts her throat with a knife.
Yeah.
But when he's choking her, there's no music going.
And like I said, simple scenes of her like going to put her clothes in the washer or like doing stuff like that. They're not playing even any vibey atmospheric music. Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Before we get to the final 15 minutes. What's your fascination with serial killers?
My personal fascination? I don't have much of one. I mean, I do from like a,
I feel like you know a lot about it.
I do, yeah. So I guess I do have a fascination, but I guess I don't have like I don't watch any Netflix documentaries or the Ted Bundy tapes. Like I don't watch.
One of the things I really respect about you is that you don't fall into the hole of Netflix true crime documentaries.
Yeah. I like to read like matter of fact like articles and stuff.
Yeah.
Similar to what I was talking about before with like the Museum of Death is that there is kind of. I think people have an interest from kind of what you talked about with Halloween, where there is a coziness to it when you can read about really dark shit that happens in the world.
And then you can just shut your computer off.
Yeah, exactly. But for me too, I do think there is kind of some value the same way because like, there are behavioral patterns that people pick up, and I think I like to hope that some people can get something good. Like we as a society can learn from it, when we study like how certain people became the way they are and how we can kind of improve like prevent things like this from happening.
No.
Not everyone does it that way. I understand. Some people just look at it as like, oh, look, he cut her head off and did it.
And also sometimes I'm curious about the intentions of people who are making these true crime shows.
Exactly. A lot of it's sensationalized. A lot of it's over. Yeah, exactly. But I'm just trying to kind of see the silver lining behind it of people being aware of things like that happening.
So, I've never had like that serial killer fascination.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily judge people that do. Like someone like you who like is genuinely curious. And I know you. I know you don't just fall under the trap of the Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
So I think like when you talk about it, I actually do trust that you look into that stuff out of a sense of curiosity and also just being like, I like to be aware that these things exist.
Yeah, I've had someone literally ask me, "Hey, who's your favorite serial killer?" And I was like, "I'm not."
Like, so that's what I mean.
I'm not going to answer that.
I know I know you don't take that stuff lightly, and I
Yeah.
always respect people that don't take that stuff lightly. But the reason I'm asking this question is because did this movie create the true crime television genre?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the reason why this movie is revolutionary in terms of horror cinema is that before this movie, a lot of like horror stories, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, were about like normal people in extraordinary situations.
Yeah.
Even the group of teenagers is in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they were in the wrong place, the wrong time. And there's a sense of dread about that. We'll talk about it, but they were in a bumfuck nowhere kind of,
Yeah.
right? And there was this mystique about it. The Omen, or like the devil possessing someone, or something.
Rosemary's Baby and those certain things. Yeah.
Stuff like that. The Antichrist, right? Mm-hmm. And this movie was like this. It could happen to you anywhere, no matter where you are. And then true crime television, and now I think that's taken in form of like the Netflix documentaries, the style of it, the editing of it, the music behind it, the stories behind it are all about he was just a husband and a loving dad.
Why did he turn out this way?
Their family was perfect.
And it cuts to like, a sibling of them being like,
He was just... he was just like any other kid.
Yeah.
And like Halloween's about that. Yeah. Michael Myers just being like any other kid. I was like, did this movie create that?
It's interesting you say that though, because like the cinematic language of Texas Chainsaw Massacre also gives that in a different way by having like a scrolling text of like around this time these events really happened. You know what I mean? It does it in its own way of having the media involved, but I think the basic like kind of story behind Michael Myers,
the narrative structure
exactly, is very much reminiscent of classic,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre definitely tackles
practically is a true crime documentary in itself
and styles itself and stuff. But in terms of like how true crime narratives are structured in media today, feels very inspired by Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of like a chicken and egg situation, at least the way I see it too, because there are real serial killers that do have similar,
of course,
situations, right?
But like, how are you telling that story? Is important.
Yeah.
And I don't think without Halloween, I wonder how these stories would look. They would still exist. There are serial killers. These are based off of real people, but like how they're told, and what kind of lens they're told through feels very like inspired by Halloween to me.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I never thought about that.
And I mean, like, if people in the comments want to disagree with me, or if they're like, hey, this came first before this, please let me know. I'm not as like fluent in the horror genre as maybe the hardcore genre fans are.
Yeah, so we'd love to be educated.
yeah, but it's interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, want to talk about the last 15 minutes?
Yeah, let's go for it. So, are you talking about from when, as soon as Laurie goes in, finds the kind of the house of horrors and gets chased by Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's
just, the movie just kicks into gear as soon as that happens.
It's like, and when you think about Halloween, you think that's the whole movie. It really isn't. Like,
yeah, most of the movie is, and this sounds really unappealing, but the movie works for this. A lot of the movie is just the babysitters meandering, walking around, looking at stuff, and you wonder, like, is Michael watching them? Is anything going to happen?
All the shots linger way too long.
Yeah.
No matter what. And simple setups, man. One light on the living room.
Yeah.
It basically feels like it's one light on the living room as Michael enters, like, and they're like kind of going at each other in the living room. She stabs Michael with the sewing needle.
Right in the neck.
And she's on the couch horrified. And it's just this overhead shot.
Well, and also just the way he kind of moves too. It's so slow, and it just feels so not human-like, and it aged so well for that reason.
Yeah.
He feels more like kind of almost like an android or something like that. Like he's like something else in a human's body.
There's nothing, I mean, we called him a little stinker, but in this sequence especially, it feels very much like, all right, I got to get through that door. All right, let me punch through the door.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It feels very like, what's it called?
Like non-human, like disconnected or something, or like
procedural.
Okay, got it.
It's like, I got to get to A to B.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? I punch through the door. It's like, it's that.
Yeah, there's not like emotions. He's not like frustrated, because like I always liked what Scream did as like a correction to that, where it feels like a person. You know how you hear him grunt and he gets hurt and he's flailing his arms and all this. He feels like a person.
And you see like pants and everything. Like, it's like interesting. It feels like a costume.
It feels like a guy wearing a costume. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I know I don't mean to say correct it like once flawed, but you get what I'm saying. It was like kind of it meant to be an opposite of that. But yeah, so Laurie thinks she killed Michael because she stabbed him in the neck, doesn't check or anything. Again, horror cliches, but like again, we got to respect this when we started them.
Goes to the kids.
Yeah.
Just checking up on them, and then Michael shows up in the background.
Yeah, he just sort of appears upstairs. She hides in the closet.
When I think of Halloween, I think of Laurie Strode in a closet.
Yeah, that scene's so good.
I think of either that shot or the shot of like the kid looking out the window and seeing like a silhouetted Michael just standing there outside the house.
Yeah.
That beautiful silhouetted shot. I think of that shot and Laurie in the closet. It's so... I don't know, man. It's so simple, but it works. I keep saying the same thing, but...
But no, I get what you're saying, yeah. And
she's trying anything at this point. She takes a metal hanger, tries to like
works,
undo it.
She nicks him in the eye with it.
And I know it's like a dated 70s thing, the way that scene is handled, the way she stabs him, and it feels kind of janky. It doesn't feel like an actual impact or whatever.
How she like stabs towards the camera, then it cuts to him reacting to being stabbed.
That works for me, though.
Yeah,
and it stays on theme with the movie of how like stripped down it is.
Yeah,
like even her like getting Michael is so matter of fact.
Yeah,
it's not this heroic moment.
It doesn't cut to a close up of like an eyeball being stabbed or something like that. Another lesser filmmaker would have done something like that.
And just like the blandness of that wide shot when Michael's laying flat on the ground and Laurie's looking out from the closet that's halfway broken. Right? The blandness of it. It doesn't feel fancy or like a horror movie.
Yeah, it
He
just feels
just-
like a house.
He's just laying on the ground and she's looking at him.
Yeah.
Like there's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, because
It doesn't feel like a James Wan lit that scene.
they
Like,
didn't add a bunch of like, all this like. I think like it was just cool how he laid right across too, because so she had to like step over him to get out of it.
Exactly.
And yeah, then that's when she has the kids run and call 911 and get help.
And then she's just sitting there in horror, and then you just see Michael slowly get up. And even in his getting up, he's not just like kind of shaking it off and everything. He just rises.
Yeah, I know. It feels like a zombie or something like that. He sneaks up on her, starts choking her out, and then that's when our boy Loomis comes in. And immediately shoots him. Doesn't even try to get through to him or call him out or anything. He just knows, like, this is a monster. I'm not, like, you can't talk to him.
Well, before that, the mask comes off.
Oh, yeah. So she struggles against him. The mask briefly comes off and it's lit perfectly where it obscures his face, but you can still kind of make something out.
Yeah, the actor who plays Michael Myers unmasked is Tony Moran. And he does a perfect job of being like a blank slate.
Yeah.
Like, I can't read him at all. I don't know what he's thinking.
And it's the way they filmed him, too.
He's confused.
Yeah.
Like, he looks confused. Like, he doesn't know what the hell just happened there.
Yeah. I know. And it's weird how he puts the mask back on, too.
He feels naked without it.
Yeah. And it's, it's always like, that's another kind of classic trope, but I love it, when the killer has to put the mask on.
As cheesy as it is, and as like, oh god, they're making it, this movie knows its iconic kind of way. In the 2018 Halloween, when it's that shot of him putting on the mask on and they start playing the music, it's still good.
Yeah.
It's annoying kind of, because you're like, this movie knows how iconic it is, and that in itself doesn't feel cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So Loomis shoots him, goes out
6 times. Empties a full barrel, into him.
He lands down in the front yard.
Yeah.
And Lori just seems like someone that's never going to be okay again.
Yeah, she's just frozen on the ground. She doesn't...
Crying.
Yeah.
And she was like, It was the boogeyman. And I love Loomis's line. He's like, as a matter of fact, it was.
Yeah. And then he goes out and looks, and you see he's gone, and the music kicks in hard immediately.
And it's funny, Lori's like crying.
Yeah.
But you don't even know if she knows yet of what happened. Loomis's face is kind of like, of course.
Like, why did I even bother?
Yeah, like I knew this was going to happen. Like, no way it was going to be this easy. And it's, what I love about it, it's a move that feels like if any other movie did it, it would be like, oh, they really want a sequel. Yeah. But I bet John Carpenter had no idea this movie was going to be as iconic as it was. There's no way he knew.
Totally.
But also, I feel like this movie's doing that not just a sequel bait, but also in a way of like, here's the point. You'll never know where evil comes from next.
Oh, yeah. Especially the way it cuts to all the different, prior locations, too.
And you hear the breathing, and the sound of the breathing intensifies.
No, the sequels never brought the breathing back.
The 2018 one didn't?
Maybe the 2018 one did, but the sequels never had, like, just the consistent heavy breathing in it.
It's so effective.
Yeah. They did try to, they did something really stupid in, like, the sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween. Because did you know they made 2 Rob Zombie movies?
No.
Yeah, they did.
Wow, it's so funny how little I know about this franchise.
Yeah, they did the sequel to Rob Zombies is they added in Michael grunting when he stabs people like he's a person. Like he literally goes like when he's killing people.
Wow.
Like how much does that ruin Michael for you?
Yeah, it feels like those movies just did the exact opposite of what I love about the Michael Myers.
Yeah, it changes the essence of Michael Myers, which you can agree or disagree with it, but it's just different.
Yeah, it's funny. This movie's, Michael Myers was never Jason, so you can't really do the Friday the 13th. Oh, it's just fun to watch him kill. He's such a specific type of killer.
Yeah.
And we didn't even hit on the mask at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's, a lot of people have said this. Blank Check talks about this a lot in their episode, which if you guys are like if you really want one of the best dissertations on Halloween, check out Blank Check's episode on Halloween. It's 3 hours long. It's a long baby, but it has Alex Ross Perry, who is a filmmaker in his own right, huge fan of horror movies. The first hour or 2 hours of the movie, they basically break down the entire horror genre before Halloween came out. So they go through so many movies, basically making it a point to, there were so many years of horror movies that by the time the reason why Halloween is so influential is because this movie is not like any of those.
Yeah. It contextualizes the movie.
But they talk about on that episode how like this mask is so good that it's no other Halloween movie has been able to make it as good as this
Oh yeah,
one.
yeah, no, it's super true. They completely change his mask in all the movies.
I want to ask you, like, why? Why is this one so effective?
I think there's just something about the texture of it, because it's not just as simple as taking the William Shatner mask and painting it white and calling it a day. There are like little nuances to his cheekbones,
Yeah.
and the forehead, and how they light him too. How you don't see his eyes when he's wearing the mask.
I think that's what I was gonna
That's
say.
a huge part of it, and I
The
think
lighting
the
is
closest,
key, yeah.
exactly. The closest, in my opinion, that they get to duplicating it is in the 2018 David Gordon Green one. Credit where credit's due.
Yeah. And because especially since it looks a little bit way more tattered and like
Yeah, it looks older, but it still felt like the very first movie's mask. It's different, but it still felt like the same mask. And Halloween 2, they literally filmed with the same mask, but it's been like warped from heat and sun damage and all this stuff because they didn't expect a sequel.
Well, I remember you were telling me, like, going into the behind the scenes of the movie, how like the actor would just put it in his pocket.
Oh yeah, he just folded it and shoved it in his pocket
because they weren't just like, this is not like a Spider-Man suit. It's
exactly.
like, yeah.
And so, and then by the time the other sequels came out, if you look at Halloween 4, that mask completely different. Like all of them, they changed drastically. The worst, I think everyone accepts generally, is in between Halloween 5 and Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
I've seen that mask.
They're
yeah.
pretty rough, and it feels nothing like Michael Myers. And so I don't know what it is, but I think it's a combination of both the design and the way it's lit and the way it's shot too. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes the mask is like poking out from his collar, and then sometimes it's tucked under. There's like little touches that it gives, and how like neat or messy the hair is. And
I gotta stress, it's a fucking Shatner mask.
Yeah, it's a William Shatner mask.
Isn't that so weird? Yeah. That is so fucking weird. Like that's like now, but he's become a horror icon, and it's William Shatner mask.
I also like how in the David Gordon Green one, how when you briefly see Michael unmask, you see like his side profile. You can tell he's blind in one eye too, because he was stabbed in the eye.
Yeah.
And you can see that corner of his mask was torn too.
No, let's wrap up this podcast. I want to ask you first, Chris, how did this movie change you?
Well, I kind of accidentally said it all, but I thought it was kind of inevitable. Halloween in general, as both a singular movie and as a franchise, like I said earlier, holds a very special place in my heart because it was the first slasher film I've been exposed to, and it terrified me, but I did find myself kind of addicted to it. I watched it with family, or like siblings, and the rest is kind of history. It was kind of my first exposure to horror a little bit, Mm-hmm. I was also a little kid that avoided horror, but once I saw Halloween 4 on TV, next time I went to Blockbuster, I found myself going to the horror section, and you can see, because they used to create like series in Blockbuster where you see all of the sequels next to each other, at least in the horror section. So I was like curiously just looking through the pictures in each one and reading the synopsis of each movie as they were going. So I credit this movie very much with catapulting my fascination with horror.
I think with this movie, I've gone through stages with it. I watched it during a time where horror wasn't my thing. I got too scared. So I watched it through my fingers. I watched it as like a required viewing because I feel like everyone I knew had seen this movie.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, being a huge horror fan and having seen a lot of horror movies, the way I look at this movie is interesting because now having seen a lot more than I had when I was younger, I realized that, like, I feel like so many horror movies need to have, like, a thing, like a stylistic, like, point of view, mm-hmm. like big choices need to be made to really scare someone. And this movie came out in 1978, and so many of the themes are still resonant with the most simple filmmaking ever. And alongside with that, of learning like, okay, the best art can be the most simple and can be the most stripped down. As someone that like came to LA wanting to be involve himself in art in some capacity, this is a great lesson in that. But thematically, I think this movie makes me think a lot about how not to get too comfortable with how safe I am, to understand that the darkest and most evil things in the world could happen to you as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's merciless. It doesn't discriminate.
So that being said, we did it. We did a podcast on Halloween.
Yay!
I'm so excited to do the other 2 movies we have planned for this month with you.
It and Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It Chapter 1. Yes.
We're probably going to talk about the other parts of it too. We're just using the first one.
The
as
Skarsgård one, not the Tim Curry ones. I just want to be clear. And obviously on our Patreon, we're going on this journey of horror comedies. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah.
Literally after we record this podcast, we're going to set up to record our commentary for Scary Movie, which is going to be a completely different vibe.
Also, guys, we do have a functioning Instagram as well, just to kind of throw out the other socials, you know?
Yeah, we upload shorts, basically clips from this podcast.
Yeah, and we're probably going to upload some little pictures and stuff, and we will keep you in the loop on what episodes we have coming up. So it's Instagram, you know, you can look us up at Movies That Changed Us. Feel free to come follow us if you like this episode. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us again and again. And last but not least, stay spooky, dudes.